sold at a certain rate.
Okay, sir, thank you.
Rate, and then the government will be tracking.
Sir, you can sign up as a leadership candidate if you like, but otherwise, we'll let this. Beginning with Jeff. Assuming it's still there in a few years, how will you manage the Heritage Trust Fund?
Assuming it's still there, assuming there's anything left, I think it would be a great pot with which to start up the Alberta Pension Plan so that we all benefit from it at the end of the day, and not just a select few.
Well, first off, we need to get back to the original intent, and look what they did in Alaska and Norway, and decide that the money that comes from non-renewable resources doesn't go into spending. Jeff did have one good point in his speech when he talks about how much Ed Stelmach has ramped up spending, and that is unacceptable. So we need to look at what could this province afford if oil and gas didn't exist. And then I propose we would take at least 50% and put it in the Heritage Trust Savings Account, and eventually that could then be used, and we can have public debate on this because we're grassroots, for an Alberta pension plan, or to eliminate either, well, it would be probably personal taxes because we are blessed with no sales tax here in Alberta. Hopefully the federal government will do that too. But bottom line, we cannot keep spending our non-renewable resources. They need to be saved and turned into an asset that can be used ongoing, generation to generation.
This is one of those issues where you're going to see us violently agreeing with each other. I think one of the problems with the Heritage Trust Fund is what they started doing is siphoning off the investment income as soon as they had that pot of money. It was $12 billion when Lockheed stopped contributing to it, or Getty stopped contributing to it, and it was $12 billion up until recently when they added a few $billion bucks. It might be back down there with the loss of the markets on it, but at least allowing that investment income to continue to allow the fund to grow, I think, is one of the things we've got to get back to. And finding a share of the royalty revenues that's reasonable to put aside year after year right off the top in the Heritage Savings Trust Fund. There are some groups that have argued it should be 30%. That seems like a reasonable amount. Maybe it should be 50%. But I think we can decide what that amount will be based on consultation with Albertans. I think we have to be aware right now that we have spent, if you look at the Canada West Foundation, something like 90% of all of the resource revenues that have come in over the last 20 or 30 years. So we are heavily dependent upon this revenue source. So part of what we have to do is make sure that we get our spending in line so that we can free up some of that room so that we have the ability to put away a large portion of those heritage funds. Because it's not really ours to spend. I mean, we're just the generation that happens to be taking out of the ground. It's an asset that really should be here, not just for us, but also for kids and grandkids into the future.
Coming in great. We want to get through as many as we possibly can. Another trend I've seen, of course, are a great deal of questions about healthcare, and with a lot of specifics. What I'm proposing is it's hard to cover in 2 minutes, and it's hard to get through all of these questions. If all of you would like to take 4 minutes and give your general idea of what we would like to see for a healthcare plan.
Can you include funding abortion on that?
That's a separate question. If we want to go into that, we submit questions on paper. Thank you. Here's one to the bottom.
Okay, first off, I want to thank my young volunteers up front for holding up these signs, and I hope they don't end up with deep vein thrombosis if we're talking healthcare. So we're doing 4 minutes? Okay.
Everybody's certainly starting now.
Okay, so bottom line is this. I'm a chiropractor, and I will talk about preventative healthcare, but first, we must immediately address the acute care system, because it is closing in, once you take out these big infrastructure spends, on 50% of the operating budget. And so that is absolutely not sustainable. Now, I have been involved in this discussion for years, and when I used to sit down with Gary Marr, when they would propose ideas, they had to deal with a federal Liberal government that would call it scary and use it to attack Alberta and attack the federal Conservatives. But he actually had some good ideas. Now here's the thing, I am not proposing we go back to those ideas. Instead, Alberta has fallen and Canada has fallen so far behind in health reform that we can look at the top 8 countries in the world, and these are all OECD countries, and pick the ones, the top 8 actually have lower waiting list times, lower costs for service, they give better service, better outcomes at a lower cost. Now, every one of these has a hybridized-in component that is private, because that gives competition. So there's things like we can have the funding follow the patient into hospitals. Right now, your hospital gets a chunk of money, and that is it. Every one of you that comes in after that, you're an expense to the system. Well, how is that going to incentivize them to improve things? Also, we need to look at not removing frontline nurses, like they've done by not hiring the new nurses this year. Instead, we need to look at removing the bureaucracy. The people that are implementing the care need to be enforced. Now, because this is healthcare and it's my issue and I could cover it all in 4 minutes, I will leave some things in the crisis care system that Danielle and Jeff and I agree on for them to answer, because I don't want to hit it all. I do want to talk about preventative care, and I will briefly answer your question on defunding abortion. First off, on defunding abortion, I believe that if the main argument is that that's a choice, we are looking at something that if we with our health dollars right now had to decide if this should be funded, it wouldn't cross the line of what needs to be funded. We've got people waiting years for hip and knee replacements and other things like that. And you know what? Danielle in her speech is right. The issue of it being illegal is a federal one, but the issue of funding it is provincial, and why do we pay for it? Now, if you're personally pro-choice, understand this. I'm pro-chiropractic, and I pay for my chiropractic out of my own pocket. So I don't want to touch your issue there. There are some things that if you're going to maybe have it once in your life, and they say it's about $500, that is not a huge issue to swallow. Now, on alternative care, we need to look, and I presented the studies to government over the years, there are preventative options that will save the system money. And I happen to know about chiropractic and that being one of them, where they've done HMO trials in the States and they've had the cost reduced by 50%, been in the 90th percentile of satisfaction, and there's my yellow card, so I'll cede my last 20 seconds to Danielle.